Time left to do question and answer. If anyone has any questions, I don't think there's a microphone, so I'm just going to ask you to shout it out, and I'll repeat it for everybody so we can hear. There you go.
Gene, I have a question for you. You talked about equations in RWD and how to make those, viewable and scannable to enlarge and zoom in on. And also, obviously, with graphics, if you have a four-part figure, you can break it into four and stack them. But how do you handle tables? Most of us medical publishers, we have these big, wide, ugly tables that have a lot of columns, and what do you do with those?
Right, so the question is about those big gnarly tables. We can rescale some things, but those big tables in journals can be a real challenge. Do you want to answer that, Gene?
Yeah, I can.
You were just talking about this last night.
A microphone. I can take a shot at answering it because it really depends on the table. I mean, we've had some publishers who are like, if it's wider than 2 columns, then we start to go to graphics. Problem with that is then you wind up with stuff that doesn't scale appropriately. And this is something I didn't say about math earlier, is that if you can do your math in SPG instead of as a graphic, it will look so much better. It will actually resize with the text, and it will be legible. The tables. Yeah, well, you can and you can't. There are ways to make it searchable, even though it's a graphic. There's all sorts of little workarounds. The thing about tables is there's a lot of different ways that you can reorganize tables. Maybe you stack things. Maybe you actually stack rows, and each row is a block unto itself. And so it's no longer exactly a table. It's the same data, and it's data that can still be compared. But we fooled around with this, and we had 3 different articles that we took, some experimental shots at. How do we make this responsive? And quite honestly, we didn't really come up with a very good idea of what to do with tables. But it's something. Tables are the spawn of, you can finish that sentence yourself, and they have been a continual problem for everybody since the invention of the table editor. So what I was trying to get at was like, okay, this stuff, yeah, you can shrink it down and you can put it on an iPhone, but some of those exhibits, they're never going to fit on an iPhone and still be readable. And the same goes for tables. So you got to kind of start, thinking outside the table. So if you can stack things or rearrange things so that you still have the content associated in such a way that you can do those comparisons that you need to be able to do, you have options. So instead of having rows across, you have a row that's actually a column. But you have the headers. If you have column and row headers, God help you, but you would have to include that with every block of the information that you're doing. Now, it really depends, because some of these tables they make them sortable, and you can do interactive things with them. So it really depends on, again, the media queries and what device you're on, and does it need to have this level of interactivity? These are all things that you need to consider when you're talking about this. And it has to be right for the scholarly stuff, because those darn professors, man. I grew up in East Lansing, Michigan. I was surrounded by them. I can't help it. Next.
Yes.
Jane, if you don't mind if I just add a comment to that to back up what she's saying. Part of this has to do with your editorial and production workflow, because ideally, that kind of restructuring that she's talking about, the best time to do that is when you're developing the book in the first place. Because, oftentimes, particularly authors that have what I think of as kind of text-heavy tables, they don't actually really need to be tables in the first place. It's just that they're used to arranging things like, okay, I got these 4 categories, and then I've got these things under these 4 categories, and you set them up as a table. Well, that could just be a list with headings, which is basically one of the strategies you're advocating. But the problem is to do that at the end of the, at the end of the process after you publish the book and then redo that, you bump into the problem of, well, the author says, look what you did to my table.
Right.
And ideally, you want to think about that kind of thing up front as much as possible.
So just to tie that statement back up and to riff back to my content strategy, content is king, context is king. Yeah, we have a lot of kings, and winter is coming. Sorry, that just came out. The thing is that this is development editorial stuff that you've got to consider in your journals. You know, there's this development stage that you go through in the editorial, and you absolutely must start going that far back. That's where your business plan is. That's where your content strategy goes. It doesn't happen, it doesn't go over the wall to production, and then your content strategy starts. It's got to start all the way back at the inception of your content.
And there's kind of a politically or author relationship aspect of this too, where, you know, they might say, no, I want it as a table. You say, oh, you mean you want people not to be able to view this on Concurrent?
Well,
You know,
at
it's
some
in their
point, now
interest
wait a
to do it
minute,
the right
at
way.
some point,
Yeah.
you have to ask yourself whether the content is going to be used on a phone.
That's true.
I mean, it's like, I don't want to go back to an author and tell them that for the sake of a device, they have to change the presentation of their data. I mean, that's an unreasonable thing. So it's like, if it doesn't work on the device, maybe it's not, you know, I mean, is the user even going to be using the device for that? I mean, we hear when people in the previous session on mobile, you know, on the use of mobile, we hear about the fact that, or we hear use cases that suggest that people are using these mobile phones for a quick, you know, scan or something like that. So I don't know. I just think that I've been a little surprised by hearing that you know, that we're going to essentially be telling our authors to present their data in a certain way, you know, because of mobile phones.
Let me rephrase that. It's not so much that you're telling them to present their data because of mobile phones or present their data because of a tablet. That's not what you're telling them to do. You're telling them that you want to develop the best user experience for their readers to get what they're trying to say as possible. And the device is irrelevant to that.
Well, okay. I think that in at least in the situation that we're in, publishing articles every week with a wide variety of tables, I just think that it's it's an argument that is not necessarily going to resonate with everyone.
It's not going to resonate with everybody, and this is a hard nut to crack.
It's also just not practical in a lot of
It
Yeah.
has to be thought of in the sense of how these things are actually being used when you're talking about scholarly content.
And absolutely, because, and I find, you know, I was in the mobile session earlier too, and it's definitely, people are, you know, scanning, looking stuff up, and looking at abstracts and stuff. Well, when they want to go and read the whole content and observe everything, they go back to their full-size iPad, which they carry around in their lab coat. Do you know how heavy this thing is?
Even on the desktop, we find, you know, I talk to researchers, and when we hear time and again, they are actually doing the same behavior on the desktop. They're browsing, they're searching, and then when they find something they really want to dig into and sink their teeth into it, they print the damn thing out, right?
The PDF, I mean, it's like,
I want to make sure we have time to get to some of these other questions. There was someone in the back?
Is it true that the next iteration of content management systems will definitely get the reading suggests we move forward with training of the content management system, you start dumping the data into the websites that publish through the networks will automatically become responsive design?
So will content management systems make it easier to deliver responsive design?
Is that the way to go?
No.
Stuart, do you want to jump in on that, or?
no, actually, I had another question for Anjanet, or Anjanet,
Um,
but you can finish.
Can I
this
res-
thought.
I'll respond maybe to the content management.
Okay.
I think NPR is a really good case study to look at for that. They have a process where they have all of their editors, people, all of their contributors of content enter stuff into a CMS that has specific fields, and then they have an entire API that they've created that takes that content and it goes through, there's a rights aspect, there's a rights layer where it looks at like, okay, who can have this content, where can this go, who can see it, that sort of thing. But then they make that open and people can develop different apps, different functionality, both internal NPR organizations as well as the public. And there's restrictions around, non-commercial use, that sort of thing. But that, because they have done that content management piece early on to say, here's the different structures, we have a short title, a long title, the abstract, the long content, the multimedia, they're able to flow that into all of these different types of web apps, websites, streaming content, that sort of thing. So someone still needs to build those different things, and there are different interface kind of things. I don't think that that's automatically going to happen, but people are thinking about those problems and how to get that information out and put it in different cases, so different experiences.
In NPR's case, that was totally content strategy. Content strategy drove every single decision they made about tools and what they built to make that happen. So there's no one CMS that's going to win them all. There's no holy grail out there that's going to make this stuff happen. It's going to be hard work, and that's what it is. But if the user experience is an immersive experience that the users are happy with, they get the information they're looking for, that's what this is about. It's about making the user experience the right user experience.
Do you have a question in the middle of the room? Can I come back to you, Stuart? or-
No, that's okay.
Okay, sorry, I want to give people, yeah.
Is there any information on how much of the web is currently responsive? And do you think we're in kind of a lag period, development lag period between, the awareness of responsive design and implementation? I'm someone who's looking into, whether to redo our website, the Modern Language Association, responsive design. I'm always surprised at how little of what I see out there is responsive now. And I'm just trying to get a grip on whether this is the inevitable tide, whether people are holding back and waiting to see what responsive design 2.0 is going to be.
Right. Well, I know that when Mashable.com launched their responsive design, on the same day, they also announced that 2013 is the year of responsive design. So I don't know if you can really trust that information. So does anyone else want to comment on that? I think what might be different is that the approaches that we use to deliver these kinds of experiences are going to change and are going to evolve. But it definitely feels to me like coming up with separate solutions to address all these different devices isn't going to work, and that does not appear to be slowing down.
I think that it's a good time to get in on doing responsive. There are so many resources out there. I think maybe a year or two ago, it was still fairly early and there were a lot more kinks being worked out, but there are like the sites that are showing that this is responsive by Brad Frost and mobile best practices. There are whole sites kind of dedicated to different patterns and how to implement things, and there's so many different examples that you can look at and kind of see like, oh, this is a problem I'm struggling with, and here's like 3 other people that have solved that. So I think it's a good time. It's still a little bit early in terms of, yes, not everyone is there yet, but that's a great opportunity then to make your experience better.
It's an opportunity, and it also is indicative of the fact that it's worth doing, but it's not something that you can simply smack something together and get it right. You have to do the upfront work. And so there are a lot of people who are in the midst of doing the upfront work right now. When you see a backlash article, oh, responsive web design, it didn't work for our mobile experience. You know what? Maybe it didn't work for the mobile experience. Maybe they didn't do it right. Maybe they didn't have their content strategy in place. There's a lot of different things that could have made it not go right. And just because you have a responsive web design for your website doesn't mean that you're not still going to have a need for a mobile app. So just bear in mind that this idea of ebooks, native apps, web apps. There's reasons for all of the above, and you have to figure out what your content strategy is, and if your content strategy needs any one of the three, or all of the three.
And you can do experiments like Tim was talking about at the keynote. You know, like if you look at our example, we took little pieces and we started working on those and iterating on those, and didn't overhaul the entire site. And so you can kind of play around and get feedback from users and find out what's working and what's not, and then change it if it's not working.
So,
Sort-
Anjanette, thank you for your talk. It was great, very informative. And I hope that the question I'm asking is not something you covered, but I have heard that for phones in particular, you had an interesting case because you were retrofitting an existing site. I've heard I've heard from one or two people for phones in particular is that some of these responsive designs can lead to some rather significant degradations in performance, especially on like 4G connections, because the page overhead is still substantially the same, even though the display issues have been corrected. I was wondering if you had run into anything like that and what you thought the impact was.
Well, one thing with our homepage, that we were very particular to actually do that mobile first, so that by default in the code, the first thing that loads is that small mobile phone picture. And only with media queries do we add the additional bigger image that has a bigger weight. We definitely want to go through and continue to iterate and look for other little places like that, and that's what we're starting to, as whenever we're doing new development, we look at that type of performance kind of thing and setting baselines to do that kind of testing and say, okay, this is the minimum that we would launch performance-wise, and so developers need to meet that.
So you had like a
for-
benchmarking program that you were using during development, and as these problems came up, you essentially solved them on the fly. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it echoes what G's been hammering home too, is that if you don't get it right, it's not going to work. You know, you do have to pay attention to that. If you just hide the big images, well, you've still loaded them, so it does have to be addressed. So I think we're at time. Thank you all for your questions. If anyone has additional questions, please come up. Thanks a lot.